Hi everyone, today I'm here with Dr. Ivan, a neurosurgeon and director of skull-based surgery at the University of Miami in Jackson. So first question, what inspired you to pursue neurosurgery?
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but I think neurosurgery is obviously the best field, right? It's just so amazing, and there's so much to learn. I always looked at the brain as a black box of medicine. It's like one of the last frontiers of unknown. And when I wanted to go into a field of medicine, I wanted something that was going to kind of keep me on my toes and something new happening every week. And that's really what's going on with all of neuroscience, is that there's so much discovery happening, so many new things. And I can honestly say that I know the brain better now with some of the new AI and whatnot that's coming out, better than I ever had learned in medical school. And so it's just exciting to kind of be in a field where you can contribute to the developments, and yet you could see major developments and breakthroughs happening like on a daily or weekly basis.
Yeah, we've also seen that. We just finished the neurosurgery block,
Yeah.
and I think this was the only block that we had like our professors or any of the guest lecturers say, we don't know why this happens, but this is what happens.
Yeah.
Versus like some of the other blocks, we know the entire mechanism and everything behind it. So I think it's also really interesting.
And then as far as neurosurgery goes, I think the exciting part for me is I'm really involved in research, and so that's kind of like in my aspect or my viewpoint, the long game, right? You're trying to look on how you could help people, many millions of people. And in fact, when I went into medicine, I first went into engineering, and I worked at Merck Pharmaceuticals with the idea that I was going to discover the next new medication for millions of people. And I realized that that takes a very long time, and many failures happen, and you're not guaranteed that you're going to make that breakthrough. So I wanted to come up with an idea of how can you help somebody every day, as well as also work on kind of these larger aspects. So in neurosurgery, I feel like I go to work, I do a surgery on somebody, and I've helped that person today and have made a big difference in their life. And then I go home, go back afterwards, and we do research and whatnot. And we're trying to also kind of develop something that could help millions of people in the future.
That's really interesting. So after medical school, you started working there? Or you
Yeah.
after residency?
Yeah, no, I was an engineer, and my mentors guided me towards going more to the biochemical engineering route and medications and pharmaceuticals rather than medical school, even though deep inside I kind of always wanted to go into medicine. And so I followed the guidance of the mentors and went that way, and then I quickly realized that that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. So yeah, so I was working at Merck, getting a PhD in engineering, and after 3 years, it took me a while. So I guess I decided I had to go back, finish up my medical school requirements, and then apply to medical school.
I think it's really good for everyone to hear, because the path isn't always linear, and a lot of people ask me questions like, I've taken 2 years off, 3 years off, I've been doing other things, but you can still go to medical school after, and I think you're a great example of that as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you're in medical school after you've had some experience, whether research or in pharmaceuticals or in whatever, it's a little bit of a different aspect of how you approach medical school. And I tend to be, I don't know, I just approached it a little bit more calm, I think, than some of my other colleagues, and was able to really enjoy it and kind of see that this was what I wanted to do. This was my passion, and just soaking in it every day was really exciting.
Second question, what advice would you give to students interested in pursuing neurosurgery?
Yeah, I mean, everybody should pursue neurosurgery, right? I mean, that's my theme. It's so amazing. But there's so many generic answers to that, so I don't want to give you the standard ones. I would say, when we review applications or we have applicants come through to our program, what stands out the most is the people that have passion and drive. I think neurosurgery picks and also develops the training career in a way that we want people to contribute to the future of neurosurgery. And so it's one of the only fields that has like a dedicated research year or subspecialty year that you have to do. And it's because we want people to contribute to research and moving the field forward, because there's so much left to know. And so it's not just about your grades and about your interests or whatnot. It's really about that kind of passion of saying that I'm curious, I want to solve problems, I want to take the next step forward and make things better than what they are right now. And there's a lot of different ways you could do that on your application. It doesn't have to be like a nature paper or anything crazy like that. And so looking for that in the applicant and finding what your passion is and conveying that to your residency program in neurosurgery is the best way.
That's good to hear. I know a lot of people are unsure of what path they even want to go to. So for the research year, is it before you apply or is it during the residency?
Yeah, so in the 7 years of neurosurgery, every program has a year where they could do research during the year. And what kind of research that is varies drastically. It doesn't necessarily have to be like lab benchtop working with cells and animals. It could be clinical research. It could be, looking at cost savings or safety or outreach, global neurosurgery, going abroad. There's a lot of different aspects that you can go into. I think that's what's so exciting is, especially when you go into medical school, you're so stressed about what career path you want to do. And it's only when you start diving into whatever your interests are that you realize that there's actually another 50 other questions of what areas you want to go into. There's 10 different subspecialties of neurosurgery. And then there's people that do all those kinds of research, people that do global research, do cost analysis, safety, benchtop, lab, clinical trials, all those kind of areas you could do in really any aspect of medicine. And so it's not only finding your passion for what medicine you want to do, but then also what is your niche within that medicine that really kind of drives you. And if it's just something like, oh, I want to do clinical trials or I want to do benchtop research, where you could do that with lots of different medicine, you just have to figure out what works best for you.
I think that's so true because in undergrad, I did mostly bench work and a little bit of clinical research. But once I got into medical school, I didn't realize there's so many types of research. Like you can do anything, you can do research really on anything.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Third question, can you walk us through what a typical surgery day looks like for you?
Yeah, I mean, they vary because all of my surgeries are very different, which is actually one of the reasons why I like neurosurgery. I focus on brain tumors and skull-based tumors, and each one's different, and the anatomy is different in every patient, and it's like a chess game. So, but most times I have an idea of what the day will look like. You come in the morning early, we round on our patients with the residents or without the residents before we go over today's cases with them. We normally have a case conference with the residents in the morning going through what the day is going to look like. You see your patient before surgery. So, surgery, you're rolling back typically at 7:30, so everything needs to happen before then. Then you typically have some time while anesthesia gets ready to kind of catch up with emails and whatnot. Then you go to your case, you do your case, and then if you're doing 1 or 2 cases that day, you have some time in between to kind of either round again and see anybody that's maybe a little sick or critically ill, see a new consult, or touch base with the research team and find out what's going on. At the end of the day, then again, depends on the situations of everything. So do you round again? Do you have research conference? Do you have other conferences? So weekly we have conferences for brain tumors, for skull-based tumors, for the research team, for the residency, quality care, M&M, all those things kind of fit into for that day. The nice thing though is you're still kind of your own boss, and that if you could schedule a lot of the cases that I do could be scheduled a week or 2 in advance, and so you could kind of schedule them around things in your life. So if you have to leave early a day, you could try to schedule a short day, short surgery, or if you have but then you have to have a long day some other time to make up for it, right? So there is some flexibility, despite what most people think about neurosurgery, is that it's not just 12 hours a day every day. There are super long hours, but if you love what you do, it doesn't feel so bad.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that preconceived notion that neurosurgery, you're going to be there all day, like all night. Maybe it's different for residency, but it's good to hear that you have balance now. You can schedule out your life things too.
Yeah, residency, you have a little bit less flexibility. It is tough to get through, but once you're an attending, you do have that. But it is also like you feel responsibility for your patients too, and so it's you can't really ever clock out, which is I think like most medicine. You're always there answering phone calls, even when you're home or on the weekends, of patients that need you or have a question or getting ready for next week. Many times though, that's something that can be taken care of pretty quickly, and so you learn to kind of not let it interrupt your kind of your day or your lifestyle and how things are going and whatnot, and try to move forward and spend time with your family too.
Next question, what's the most challenging type of brain tumor surgery you perform?
Yeah, I mean, they're all so different, and they all have their own challenging aspects. Uh, it's again one of the reasons that I love doing what I do. I think that in my subspecialty, probably the most challenging are tumors in the cerebral pontine angle. So either acoustic neuromas or petroclival meningiomas, because they're in a location where they're entangled in the cranial nerves and the brainstem and the vasculature in that area. And any wrong move could lead to like a pretty devastating injury. And so it's a high stress case, but at the same time, many of those cases you could cure the patient. So you're striving to do better because you know if you could get all the tumor out, then the patient's essentially cured for life, which is really exciting. But at the same time, if you make a mistake, then it's really devastating to the patient. And most of those arteries and nerves are just like a few pieces of hair. And so being able to untangle them and knowing the thresholds is a very challenging aspect that takes a lot of experience.
Yeah, definitely. The like fine motor skills,
Yeah.
those like nerves.
Yeah, and those cases take many hours. Those are the ones that sometimes could go, on average they're like 6 or 7, but sometimes they could go 12 or 13 hours.
Wow, for
Yeah.
one. Wow. How is AI and virtual reality currently impacting neurosurgery, and what do you see for the future?
Yeah, it's having a huge impact. We have part of my lab is devoted to AI and virtual reality work, and so we are incorporating it in all aspects, in preoperative planning, radiomics, intraoperative planning and strategy for surgeries, and collecting of data, analyzing of data, and interpreting. And so, if I were to encourage anybody in what area of research to go to, is to incorporate understanding and learning, machine learning, AI into their research, because it's going to affect all aspects. I think the exciting part is that, I was always taught that medicine is kind of like an art, right? And so you can't follow a protocol, you can't follow, a paper that talks about 10 patients, because we know that there's so many different kinds of patients, and everybody presents with their own specific, symptoms and their career and their own emotion about surgery and what they want, what they don't want, plus all of their medical problems, and then the size of the tumor. It gets really complicated, and there's no way that you could really, write about that and capture all of the variables at once. And so what AI is doing is really getting us much closer to kind of looking at those intricacies of every person. We've learning that we need to collect that data more specifically, like, how many times we write down what career the patient has, or what their, how much they use their hand or their arm or their hearing or their eyes, and what they do in their daily life. But as we collect that data and we start applying AI, we're going to get closer and closer to really optimizing what is the best thing to do for every person that we see, and not just, and there may be actually an algorithm that will work. But it's we need to collect millions and millions of data points to get to that point.
Right. I know for us, AI is very helpful in our learning and asking questions and reaffirming our knowledge. So it's been really great for medical school classes. But also right now we're creating an app for dermatology skin lesions and the AI assessment of that. And the issue that we've run into is that there's not enough data points. We need like a huge database to create a more inclusive
Right.
App that will help individuals, especially like darker skinned individuals, whereas a lot of the databases have lighter skin tones, and you fall into those issues as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we're working on both radiomics using AI and with pathology, with intraoperative pathology, to able to tell what the tumor is as you're operating in the margins. And just like you're saying, in some cases it's working really well, the common places, right? But then you have these zebras in medicine that are 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million that happen. And how do you train the AI on these rare examples? But yet you could look them up very quickly in your textbook and you would find an easy example of that. And so it's going to take time, but it is exciting to see that it is moving forward, and it is really providing from the students to the residents to the faculty, useful information to learn quicker and to utilize it to make decisions faster, and hopefully we'll end up improving our patients significantly.
What is a brain-computer interface, and how close are we to integrating it in daily neurosurgical care?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's another area of neurosurgery that's extremely innovative and exciting to be a part of. Um, BCI is the ability for the brain to communicate and interact with a computer. And there's a device where we can implant into the brain, and either using wire or wireless technology, you could have that data transfer happen. And it's actually been around for quite some time. It's been around for almost 20 years, but it's only recently that we've developed the computing power and the materials to allow better data transfer to really improve the quality of information that we're able to use from it and improve the patient's quality of care. Uh, Elon Musk talks about this idea of bitrate, which is how much data you could transfer from using communication. So when I'm talking to you or whether I'm typing on a keyboard, you could only transfer so much data at the same time. And I can only type so fast or talk so fast, and I'm limited then by how much data you could transfer. And so if we could expand that window, just think of how much more efficient you could be with everything that you do in your life, with managing social media and studying and cooking and getting ready for residency and all these kinds of things at the same time. And a lot of times our mind is going a mile a minute, but yet to sit down and do a task, you have to kind of focus. And so if we could widen that, I think the abilities are just exponential. And we've been lucky enough to be a part of the Neuralink clinical trial, which is the one with Elon Musk, where we're implanting patients that have spinal cord injury or ALS, and they can't move their arms and legs. And so for the first time, now they can communicate in a way that's much more efficient and much more useful than trying to either like use a mouth stick or blow into a straw, which takes a lot of time, and everybody in the room could see that you're trying to do something. And so it's a little bit, when they do it over and over again like that, it becomes awkward for them and challenging. And so now for the first time, they could do it more efficiently. They could type messages, they could write books, they could use YouTube and give videos, play video games. Really what they've been able to do has been amazing. And they also have this ability to kind of do it on their own and not be so public with kind of the way that they're trying to communicate with people, which has been really helpful in them. So just in the small cohort of patients that we worked with, as well as prior clinical trials that we've done with the same kind of technology, the impact that we're having on the quality of life of these patients is just tremendous. And looking forward, it's exciting to see that, beyond just movement in spinal cord injury patients, it can really help any patient with any neurocognitive issue, whether it be blindness or speech issues, or strokes happen everywhere in the brain. So wherever a stroke may happen, we may be able now to stimulate and interact with that part of the brain to try to improve it in some way using this technology. So it's really exciting, and most importantly, it seems that we're really helping these patients and improve their quality of life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think it could ever have a role for dementia patients?
Yeah, I think that as we learn more with different areas of the brain, and so as you probably have remembered from neuroscience, the motor cortex is pretty straightforward. We know it very well. But in other areas of the brains, it's more of like a network that's working together. And so that's another area of my research, is looking at connectomics and using AI to understand some of these complex areas of the brain, like cognition, memory, emotion, empathy. These are all things that are affected in patients with dementia. And so it's not just kind of stimulating one area and miraculously making it better. It's trying to understand, multiple networks that are kind of deficient, and how can you, optimize and improve them and stimulate them and augment them in a way that you could have a pretty meaningful impact. And so we start with very simple point things, whereas, we know where the hand cortex is, we know where the leg cortex is, and a lot of discovery is coming out of this because we're learning more and more about how the brain works by using these devices. And I think eventually we could get to that point in the distant future, but we have a long way to go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ivan, for answering everyone's questions. If you have any more questions or any comments, please feel free to leave them below.